back to the class once again, everyone. Today, we are going to be continuing with a very similar concept as what we saw in the last video. In the last video, we talked about a few specific characters that actually have better performance in some situations when they're slower. Today is going to be a little similar, but also a little different. We're going to be looking at 5 characters, or rather maybe 10-ish, 5.5, I don't know. Characters that don't need speed to function. So, different from the other 5 characters that we saw in the last video, speed doesn't really necessarily make these characters worse. It doesn't degrade what they're good at doing, but at the same time, it really doesn't make any difference. So again, if you're really trying to build your GAC roster, and you're trying to figure out where you need to put your speed, and where you need to put your mods that don't have speed, these are 5 really great characters. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. A lot of them have different mechanics that allow them to get away with it. But there's going to be one mechanic that's going to be pretty universal with all of them, and that is going to be turn meter. So that being said, let's go ahead and look at B2. B2 is an amazing character. He does not need speed. And again, I mentioned it already, one of the big reasons why he doesn't need speed is because of how his unique works. I believe this is the right one. Actually, I believe that is the top one now that I look at it. Yeah, B2 has a 40% chance to gain 100% turn meter when another ally is evaded or damaged by an attack. So he is constantly living with a percentage chance to be able to just take a full turn. 100% turn meter means he gets to turn immediately. He gets to go, he gets his turn. So having speed on him ends up, again, not being detrimental, but it just kind of ends up being useless when he's going to get his free turns all the time anyways. That being said, if he doesn't need speed, what can we put in speed's place to be really helpful for him? And actually, one of the things that's going to be really helpful for him and some of the others is tenacity. He needs a whole lot of tenacity. You guys see that I have several tenacity sets. I have no speed on him at all, but I have well over 120% tenacity and 100% potency. The potency is less so important, especially in the General Grievous lineup, because he gets potency from the lead, but it's good nowadays against the CLS team. So yeah, we have a lot of potency on him, and the reason why that potency and tenacity is there is so that he doesn't get dazed or shocked. Because if this character gets dazed, he's never taking a turn, because you can't get turn meter when you're dazed. So that's ultimately what you want to replace it with. I do also have a crit avoidance error on him rather than speed, just because B1 has some natural crit avoidance into the General Grievous team. So you end up stacking these two together, and it just really makes him very useful and different. Again, this is a character that you're going to be able to use mods that don't necessarily have speed on, because it doesn't really changes for his performance, and you can benefit from more things like crit avoidance and tenacity. Protection is pretty good on him as well. So that is B2, he's our first character. The second character, well, you're going to see that I have no speed on him because I just don't have mods on him in general, because my resistance really isn't that great. I have not gone after Galactic Legends Ray, but Resistance Trooper has a very similar type of mechanic that I actually used to use a lot when using him with the OG Fin Zeta, rest in peace. And that is pretty much this right here. He has 10% potency and 55% turn meter when an enemy who is not exposed becomes exposed. That is huge. So all that has to happen is 2 enemies getting exposed and he automatically gets a turn. And this is really rampant in both the JTR lineups and OG Finn lineups. This is not a character that is used that much nowadays. It depends on your roster, but there are some really clutch uses with him still, with Han and Chewie, 3PO, and like a JTR lead. Again, not exactly the most common thing you're going to use nowadays, but it is a team that exists, and this is the character that can function without speed because of this. That being said, how do you want to mod him? You generally want to mod him with a bunch of potency. You want him to be able to get his explosives off that I believe is on his basic every single time he can get it. So that's a big thing for him. Get the explosives, get the turn meter train going for him, and have at it. Because that basic is really cool under Jedi Training Ray, because he can get 2 because of her lead. But obviously, not great enough character for me to have modded because I don't use them. Other character. Now we start moving into a different type of character, and that is Barris. Barris actually doesn't have a whole lot of turn meter mechanics like the previous 2 characters. B2 as well as Resistance Trooper, they had ways to get a massive amounts of turn meter, so they were constantly taking turn. The thing about Barris is, Barris doesn't necessarily need to take a turn. Like, that is why she's so great. Most people, they have Barris on their team specifically for this unique. And the bottom half of the paragraph. Whenever an ally is critically hit, that ally recovers 20% health, and Barris gains 10% turn meter. So this entire kit, this entire character revolves around this phrase. Whenever an ally is critically hit, they recover 20% health. And that being said, she doesn't need to take a turn for that to happen. She doesn't need to keep going. She doesn't need to use an ability. This is something that's going to happen passively just by the fact that she exists in the team. So you don't need her to have a lot of speed. You don't really need her to have any speed because she's just going to keep going. What you really, really want to focus on at the end of the day is percent health. Percent health is going to go so far with her. You want to get as much of that on as possible so that I believe I even have a air on her. Yeah, I even have an air with no speed, which generally these are not a great idea. But on her, it works so stinking well because you want her to survive. She gets taken out, you lose that unique. And it looks like we are in the middle of a client restart. But that being said, you really want to mod her mostly for health. You don't really have to worry too much about protection because a lot of lineups she loses it. One of the main lineups that she needs or that she is in is going to be Padme's team. And Padme doesn't really have a way to recover protection. That being said, you can load her up with a whole lot of defense. So if you're looking for two stats, obviously you want the percent health on the primaries. You want health sets because that also is kind of what Padme revolves around. But at the same time, a little bit of defense percent maybe in the secondaries can be a really, really nice way to even her out. So that is going to be Bear. She's the third character there. Let's go ahead and look at the rests for here. So the other two characters, we're kind of going back to the turn meter mechanics here. So we're going to go ahead and look at Fives. And Fives, I believe, does require his Zeta. So it's this one right here, Domino Squad, where he gains 15% turn meter whenever another clone, trooper, or 501st takes damage and half that amount for other allies. So he's constantly getting turn meter when you're hitting the other characters in the team, and he will eventually just constantly take turns, especially with an AoE. And AoE is pretty much 100% turn meter, very similar to B2. One really big disclaimer on Fives, though. You want speed on him if you're taking him on offense. That's pretty important because when he sacrifices, his speed is also given to the other characters. The reason why that's not as important on defense is because any capable player is going to go right after Fives. They are not going to let Fives get the sacrifice. So the speed ends up just becoming pointless. And what you want to do is you want to make him super, super tanky. As much protection, as much defense, as much health as you can get on him. There are even some people that will put a crit avoidance arrow on him. I'm not a really big fan of that, specifically because he doesn't have any other ways of gaining crit avoidance. So without being able to double down on it, it doesn't make a huge difference. But again, if you're wanting to use this character on defense against a capable player, load him up with as much survivability as possible and just forget speed. He'll get a turn from his unique, and at the end of the day, people are going to target him without him taunting just because of how valuable that sacrifice is. So he doesn't need to be able to take the turn to be able to taunt. Again, this is for defensive use only. Offensively, you want speed on him, and also for LSTB, you want a good amount of speed on him again because when you trigger sacrifice, that speed is also getting transferred. The last character we have here is going to be L3. L3 just does it all, and I love L3 because, again, we're going to be looking at a unique, I believe it is this one here, where she gains 15% turn meter whenever another scoundrel ally takes damage, or droid for that matter. So she's constantly getting turn meter. Again, every single AoE, you're pretty much giving her a full new turn, which is awesome. And one of the stupid good things about L3 is that she is also going to dispel debuffs. Excuse me. And one of the reasons why that's also so cool is because she can dispel them on herself. So you're going to see here, I don't have her loaded up with a whole lot of tenacity like we had on B2 because Daze isn't that big of a threat on her because as soon as someone uses an AoE, she has her debuffs dispelled and she can keep getting turns. She can keep taunting when she gets her turns and she just works fantastically. That being said, let's go ahead and look at the mods I do have on her. I believe I have is it a crit avoidance arrow? Yeah, I have a crit avoidance arrow because I believe one of her modifications that she does to herself also gives a little bit of crit avoidance, so you really want to double down on that. We do have defense sets. Full defense sets and protection primaries is the best model here for her. I do not have as many defense sets, so I did have to put some health sets down. But ultimately, that should be your goal. Get as much defense, protection, and crit avoidance as you possibly can on her. So those are the 5 characters, and now there is also going to be Jawas. Why in the world do I have Jawas here? So I don't currently use Jawas, but I might in the future once we continue to expand teams as a last resort type of mechanic. And one of the great things about them is really Jawas, they only do one thing. They only do one thing in the current game, and that is Jawa, I believe it's Jawa Scavenger. He has an Omega called Line in the Sand. And what does this do? Pretty much every single time someone hits a Jawa, they have a chance to get a thermal latched onto them. This ends up being really, really good because there are a lot of teams that like to assist a whole lot, like Mon Mothma or Geonosians, and when they do this, they just load themselves up with thermals and just start exploding. Terrible. Absolutely terrible for banners. Like, you're going to get like a 49 using this tactic. But this is something that, again, doesn't require speed on your part. You just need to get hit and survive it. And granted, most people don't want to take Jawas too high. So really how you want to mod them is just straight flat protection secondaries and primary protection on them as well. You don't need to worry about speed, not even really health at all. Like, they need that big protection shell so they just die immediately before the thermals have a chance to go off. And that goes for all of them, not just Jawa Scavenger. They don't really need to take a turn to do what they needed to do. They just take the hits, dish out thermals, and call it a day. So that is going to be it for today, guys. Again, these are characters that you can put speed on, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't change their performance too much. They're still completely valuable without it. So I hope it was helpful. And as always, stay awesome.